Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. To ask a question during the question and answer session, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Kelly Holloway with U.S. Department of Commerce. You may begin.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our participants for joining us today in our program as part of the Basic Guide to Exporting webinar series on how to select a freight forwarder, an integral piece to successful international transactions. You can have all the purchase orders you could dream of, but unless you can get your products from here to there, clear customs, and get paid, then those POs are of no value. So this is a very important piece of doing business internationally. We're glad you're here with us. I do want to point out that this Basic Guide to Exporting webinar series offered by the U.S. Department of Commerce's Trade Information Center is one of the small ways that we're working towards supporting the President's National Export Initiative, starting in a base of 2011, looking to double exports by 2015. It takes a lot of work, and it's going to require the small and medium-sized businesses of America to do more internationally to meet those targets and to help our U.S. economy. So we're glad you're with us, appreciate your interest, and hope to shed some light on the process as well. I mentioned the operator introduced me, Kelly Holloway, with the U.S. Department of Commerce, International Trade Specialist. But most important, our speaker today is Butch Conner, Director of Ocean Operations with J.S. Conner. And Butch reigns from the East Coast, where J.S. Conner is headquartered in Maryland. He has over 20 years of experience in international transportation and logistics with responsibilities covering the gamut from export compliance, project cargo, supply chain management, and more. Extensive experience on projects with Department of Defense, Department of State, USAID, and many small, medium-sized companies around the country. His team at J.S. Conner is part of this company that has been around for 100 years. So not only does Butch have a great deal of expertise to share with you, but is supported by a very adept, long-standing team of specialists. So you see here some of the topics we're going to cover. The scope of services that freight forwarders provide, understanding the costs related to shipping, knowing what is your responsibility, the exporter, and what the freight forwarder will take care of, with the goal of making sure that you are picking the right service provider for your need. And he's going to go through that a little bit. What I do want to just draw your attention to real quick, this is part of the portal to the International Trade Administration of the Department of Commerce, where there's a huge wealth of information on doing business internationally. Some transaction-specific information, but many other details, many other training webinars like this, briefings, country-specific briefings. Our organization works to help companies find distributors, to promote at trade shows, to do background checks on potential partners, and much more. So I'll encourage you to check out that site. If you need any assistance, how to get started, you can't find what you're looking for, simply call 1-800-USA-TRADE. That's a good number to put in your Rolodex. That's our call center, and they're able to help you. So with that, let me go ahead and pull up Butch's PowerPoint. And I'm going to ask you, please, Mr. Conner, to take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kelly, and I appreciate this opportunity today with the Department of Commerce, and hopefully this will be something that will be helpful to the participants as they move forward. As I note there, today we are working on selecting a forwarder and understanding their role.
Can I interrupt for one moment? I'm sorry. I failed to, one important detail to share with the participants is that as Mr. Conner goes along, if questions occur to you, that you can type in those questions at any time. And if you look at the top of your screen, you'll see a Q&A tab, and that's where you can submit questions. And then at the end of the program, we will have an open question and answer period as well. So sorry to interrupt, but an important detail. Thanks.
Of course, yes. Just briefly, a little bit about our company, John S. Connor. As Kelly had alluded to, we were founded in 1917 and currently remain privately held. So we are proud to be in our 95th year and heading toward 100. We are headquartered in Baltimore and have 5 additional offices. Some of the services, of course, we have is international logistics, forwarding projects, as was mentioned, customs broker, consulting, and more. And we handle global services, including any foreign-to-foreign possibilities. And certainly from a technology standpoint, which is very important these days, we really stress the visibility of your shipment activity and the possible integrations with systems that could go on. Okay, in targeting a freight forwarder, I like to say what's most important is to do your homework. We have so much available to us today on the web especially, and that really is probably a good place to start if you have not, searching both your state, local, and regional areas for forwarders. Another important resource is going to be researching our industry association, which is very involved in our business, and that is the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of America. And yes, that is a mouthful, otherwise known as NCBFAA. And again, they are very involved in the industry, in legislation. We have a lot of impact of what goes on Capitol Hill from a regulatory standpoint, and they certainly can provide you information on forwarders that you may be seeking. Of course, another resource on that will be the researching any local broker and forwarder associations in your areas, and that is also a very good resource. Important points here, both with the NCBFAA and local forwarders groups, are to find out that your forwarder is involved. Very important to make sure that they are staying up on industry trends, and a lot of that is through communication and interaction with the NCBFAA and how they are able to interact with the local forwarder and broker associations so that everyone can be up to date as to what's going on. Okay, as we continue here, certainly a very good and important point is to reach out to others for referrals. That could be groups that are in your industry. It could be groups that you know locally or regionally that do international transactions. So anyone that you feel comfortable with in touching base with them and finding out who they are involved with is very important and very good reference. And, you know, I like to say also, just like you would be doing your normal hiring practices, interview the candidates. If at all possible, it's good to get into their offices, meet the people, find out, you know, who you'll be working with, how you'll be doing things, their warehouse, if they have something available, things like that that are good ways to pinpoint and get a feel for the freight forwarder that you would like to deal with. So what I like to present is somewhat just a checklist okay, as you are trying to determine and target and select a freight forwarder. Certainly, it's very important that they're a true professional. As I said before, about that they do stay involved with the industry. That goes to the second point of experience and knowledge, because as long as they are informed, it's very important for them to push that out to their clients, so their clients are always in compliance, understanding what the impacts are in the market, and it's always key to have that, and knowing, and that brings a comfort level, I think, overall. And certainly you want to find a forwarder that understands your industry. Plenty of industries out there, and certainly forwarders probably touch base with a majority of them, but not necessarily all of them. So you would want to certainly get a feel for that. And if they do, then that would also relate to understanding your commodities that you are looking to export. Usually the two go together, both industry and commodities. So it's very possible that the forwarders do have a relationship there involved, but it's possible that they don't, and that would be something that you would want to pinpoint. It's very important that a freight forwarder is compliance-driven. We, in our interaction with our groups, I mean, that's probably the key component, that we want to always keep our clients in compliance, so that there are no issues from a regulatory standpoint or anything else that could end up developing out of those issues. So we find that it is very important that the forwarder handles their compliance, and at the same point it should relate to their client. Is your forwarder involved in most trade lanes? So a broad trade lane interaction is very important. There certainly are those who are narrowly focused, whether it would be just Europe or just the Far East, and that would be important to know as well, so that you can see that they have some of that experience and knowledge in the trade lanes that you appear to participate in, that you're looking to. And strategic global partnerships. This is important because not every forwarder that you're going to be interacting with or certainly targeting are global, and as in global offices, a multinational corporation, and which is okay. But what is important is, what is their involvement with partnerships around the world, how long they have been involved with these various partners, and the size and scope of those partners, very important as you're moving forward and are going to need some solid experience again and professionalism on the foreign side with your buyer. And finally, the services. You certainly want to be able to understand all of the services that a forwarder can provide. Certainly not all of them cover the same. Most will cover your certainly your basic requirements, which is fine, but hopefully as you grow, you want to be able to have a forwarder that is capable and can grow with you. So those are certainly some important points to keep in mind.
Can I ask 2 points related to this? One on strategic global partnerships. In your opinion, is there a difference between whether the freight forwarder has employed staff, an actual office overseas, versus a partnership, and should that be a weighting criteria in selecting a forwarder? And then my other question is related to broad trade lanes. Is that the same as country-specific experience?
Yes. I'll start with the global partnership. Certainly, there is probably some streamlining when you have forwarders who have offices in multiple countries, and that can bring some things to the table that may be important to an exporter, but it wouldn't say, or I wouldn't say that that is to any specific advantage necessarily over a forwarder here in the U.S. who has those global partnerships, and more importantly that they have had those partnerships in place for a number of years. So, there brings a level there of continuity, and there shouldn't, hopefully that would then not bring about any concern about the fact that they are not the same corporation. And in reference to the question on the trade lanes, yeah, trade lanes is anything from country to country, as you're noting there. So U.S. to Germany, U.S. to Japan, U.S. to Brazil. Those are all can be considered trade lanes. And then you can also look at the broader ones, which would be, the areas, Europe, Asia, etc.
Thanks.
Okay. Regulations. It's also important for you to be checking with your forwarder to see that, as a working in the U.S., they should have a license. As I noted with the FMC, which is the Federal Maritime Commission, they license the forwarders here in the United States. So that could be an area for you to check on. And also with air freight forwarders, and they're tying into the IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, and here in the U.S., the TSA, Transportation Safety Administration. Certainly, the TSA is important and has really come to the forefront over the last several years, and to be certified with TSA is an important step. Just a quick note here, if you are involved with forwarders, there are many forwarders out there who are also NVOCCs, and that stands for Non-Vessel Operating Common Carrier. Basically, they do not have any of their own vessels, but they are considered a carrier. And if you are an NVOCC, then they would also be licensed by the FMC as an Ocean Transportation Intermediary, otherwise known as OTI. And again, they do issue their own bills of lading on the ocean side and act as carriers. So that could be another point that you might want to explore with them. Certainly there are ways to book cargo directly with carriers, but the NVOCCs also play an important role because they interact with many carriers and can provide flexibility both in pricing, in services, and in transits and routings. So that can be an important point. Other services that you would want to be taking a look at with a forwarder, do they have packing and crating capabilities, or at least some access for you? Are they consolidating in any manner and have their own warehousing? Insurance, of course, very important point in the international transaction. Consular legalization, very specific to certain countries, and if that is required, you see a lot of that, in particular into the Middle East, which has also been fading, shall we say, in the last couple of years, that they're not as concerned there with some of that. And as I had noted before, it's important about the web access so that you are able to track your shipments and get some reporting from your forwarder on your activities. Two very good points to keep in mind as you're moving forward. Also, just some other services you may want to keep in mind that do tie into compliance. The first one there, electronic export information. That is the details you will be providing, or the forwarder would be providing to U.S. Customs in order to export your cargo, somewhat considered an export clearance out of the U.S. Licensing. A forwarder most likely won't be involved in the licensing, but it would be important for them to be able to point out to you, depending on what your commodity is, if that would be something that would trigger a license. And certainly you would go off to the other government websites, whether it was BIS or Commerce itself, or even State Department, that would assist you in confirming if your cargo is licensable. Hazardous cargo regulations and staying compliance there is very important, and that is a specialty area. Anti-boycott, along with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Forwarders, of course, wouldn't be saying they're specialists on this, because they certainly get into a very strong legal area, but they would help you, point you in the right direction, and be able to assist there. And just in reference to payments, certainly the financial portion is very important, and most forwarders should have some experience in letters of credit or drafts or other things involved there, and be able to assist and point you in the right direction as to what you can look for and expect. So those are additional services that you could be looking for your forwarder to offer. And again, technology, as we all know, it continues to be and play an important role as we move forward. And it's great, again, to have a web platform available to you to access shipment visibility, certainly from end-to-end, origin to destination, having the reporting features available, so you could be doing some of your own manipulating of data and massaging in those reports. That can help you with your business. And systems integrations. Do they have the capability to either develop something along with EDI or some kind of XML data interchange, whether that is with your company directly or it might involve another party? Again, very important features that you would want to look into, depending, of course, on levels of sophistication and capability. This is something that we like to put out there. Again, it's a international transaction checklist. Most exporters, these all would be good steps for them to take In most cases, they already have identified their a need or a challenge that's out there that they feel that they can play a role in and solve for their buyers in different markets, and have probably already taken the step of taking a market study in some manner or access to study, and whether that has been able to roll into how they have canvassed the market and where they may be best to buy or find the buyers for their goods internationally. Again, the financing is a very important part for everyone, so understanding the countries that you're dealing with, the parties that you're dealing with, and how you would arrange that. I mean, there's many ways that can be developed, and of course, as much as you can get up front is always better, but the banks can certainly help you with that in most manners. And as we talked a little bit about the documentation, legal issues that would in the transaction, and you want to make sure that you have all of that in order as you move forward. And then that would roll into, hopefully you found your market and prospective buyers, and then you want to be able to get a PO issued and get those goods produced. And once that's all in shape, then of course now it's time to ship it. And I have there as a now what, but an exporter who is really going along the process properly and has involved their forwarder as early on as they can is always important. And in many cases, the freight forwarder may have already been involved in discussing some of these issues with them if they're going into a market for the first time, if they're going into a new market, different than what they have been involved with previously. So it's always important to have your forwarder involved early. Just some quick, what the freight forwarder does not. They do not operate ships or operate planes and do not operate trucks generally. And that is, you certainly have some groups that will have some local pickup and delivery operations, but I think in general they usually do not. Okay, what a professional forwarder does do, they arrange the transit, and hopefully the forwarder you're dealing with can help you cover ocean, air, truck, intermodal. Intermodal being if your cargo has to be put on the rail somewhere within the U.S. Or even toward destination to get to the final point. And it's important that that it's clear that the freight forwarder does act as an agent for you. So finding the right one and developing that partnership can only end up benefiting both parties, and certainly the exporter. The role of the freight forwarder. As I mentioned, it's important to get involved with the freight forwarder early in your international transactions, and it helps the forwarder if they understand the shipper's needs. As in order to obtain the best routing, there are different ways, of course, that freight could move to a particular point, whether the shipments, and depending on the destinations, they may have to be transshipped over different locations in the world. So that's involved with the routing. Certainly there are more directs, and then there are also some that have additional transshipment points that all take into account the service and the transit time that are involved. Obtaining competitive rates and the options that go with those rates. As I mentioned just about the best routing, and the rates will certainly change in many aspects, whether it's the lane that you are in, it's the type of cargo that you have, is it in a reefer container, is it just a regular container, is it an oversized type of cargo. That all affects the rates and the options, of course, again, is how you wanted to get there. You want to get there the most direct route, which in many cases has a higher cost to it. If your shipments happen to transship over one or even two ports, again, you take into account the amount of time that's involved there, and the pricing would also differ for you. So the forwarder definitely would want to have the ability to understand what you are looking for in order to access that information. Arranging the best multimodal transport modes. As mentioned, it can be from any point in the world, from the U.S. to any point in the world, and there could be different ways of it getting there. Certainly, most of them are picked up by truck or delivered in some fashion to a warehouse. You can stuff the containers. They would move on the rail possibly at origin here in the U.S. And or the same at destination. And it is very important that they're able to, your forwarder are able to step through to find what modes would work best. And of course, complying with U.S. regulations. As I mentioned, a freight forwarder should be very compliance driven, and the forwarder always wants to keep their clients in compliance. So that certainly is very important. And arranging destination clearance and delivery. Some of this can depend on what the terms are of the shipment, and I'll go into that quickly in the next slide. And this would also get into the partnerships that I was mentioning, whether it is a corporation's own office, foreign office, or if it is a partner with the U.S. forwarder here.
Butch, can I ask you two things about compliance before you move on to the next slide?
Certainly.
One, the first is about liability and responsibility, for proper export documentation preparations and whatnot. Does the freight forwarder hold that liability? Is it jointly held with the actual exporter, even though the freight forwarder fills it out? And then related to that, if the freight forwarder has somehow violated or not complied with some regulation, what tools does a U.S. company have to search, to see if there's been some violation in the past, or is there any record of that?
Yes. In reference to the regulations, the exporter from the United States is always going to be the responsible party. A forwarder should know their role in helping to receive all of the proper information in their contact with the exporter. But they also have a role, the forwarder, to do their due diligence. So it's not like they are not responsible in some manner. So again, in the end, the regulations do say it lies with the exporter. So it's important, again, to your forwarder to be able to provide that expertise and knowledge so that it helps them maintain compliance. Your second question was in reference to if there have been problems. You would want to try to interact with the Federal Maritime Commission. They would have some information if there was some difficulties or problems with forwarders. That would be a good place to start.
Thank you.
Okay. So as I mentioned in reference to the clearance and delivery, a lot of that has to do with what are known as Incoterms. Some of the participants may be familiar with these and others maybe not as much. But they are a set of international rules for interpretation, which is important to recall because there is a misconception that Incoterms are law, and they are not. What is important, or certainly a good reason to use and get involved with using Incoterms, is that they do play a role in the international law, and that most legal processes will they consider the Incoterms a meeting of the minds, in quotes, in reference to the parties that are involved. Just some examples there. The first one being EXWorks, is EXW, CIF, Cost Insurance and Freight, and DDP, Delivered Duty Paid. Those are various terms, and as it says there, this does define the responsibilities of buyer and seller and the risks that can be assumed in the transaction from door seller to door buyer. And it would be important to have these in your international contracts, and the fact that they should be very specific. As you notice up there, each of the terms is followed by a location, being Milwaukee, Sao Paulo, or Cleveland. And it's very important that you would do that as the Incoterm really requests that. And just so that you are aware that the 2010 Incoterms came out a year ago, right at the beginning of 2011, and there are certainly parties out there that are still using the previous 2000 Incoterms, so it would be important for you to specify which Incoterm you are using.
And I'd like to mention to the participants today that we have done a program specific on Incoterms. There are some cost-related considerations, business strategy that is impacted by the selection of your Incoterms. So I encourage you to look at that at export.gov/webinars, where we post many of our recorded programs.
Okay. Just a quick overview of what a typical export shipment would look like and where the forwarder services would be involved. You would want to, again, early in the process, so get involved with your forwarder so they can provide an estimated quote of charges depending on your terms. Again, denied party screening. That is one of the compliance steps that is required, and if for any reason you had any concerns about a potential buyer early on, you could get those parties screened to provide you information if there are concerns or any reason those parties have restrictions on them based on U.S. department or government agency requirements. And then they would end up booking the space on the plane or vessel per your needs, and taking that first step of arranging pickup and delivery, bringing it to the carrier here in the U.S., the compliance steps of your export clearance, as I noted earlier, which is providing the EEI that I mentioned, and that information is transmitted through AES, which is the Automated Export System. Preparing and transmitting the proper documents and to the various parties that are involved in the transaction. And finally, arranging the destination clearance and delivery according to the terms. Just a quick flow chart here of how it would proceed. If the exporter is not aware of the U.S. PPI term, stands for United States Principal Party in Interest, in which that's where the U.S. is saying that party is involved and has responsibilities. The U.S. PPI is basically, it comes down to more to a financial position, and in the government's eyes, it's who is receiving the financial reward for the cargo, which ends up being the seller here in the U.S. And just the process there of booking and coordinating shipment to clearance. Again, the very important here, record keeping is another important point as you're going through the shipment and the documents are produced. An exporter certainly has liability in that they have to maintain the record keeping by customs, and I'm just mentioning here of how it's split up with denied party screening, your AES transaction, cargo that has licenses involved, and all the records that are tied into that, and any other preferred government agency requirements. You certainly want to maintain your records. Very important. Again, when you are involving Incoterms, it would be very important into which party has what responsibilities. So there is a note, or I should say a certain type of transaction called the routed export. And normally that is going to be where the foreign party is expected to move the cargo, and that they end up being the FPPI in this case, and they would be having their own forwarder in their country routing it via a foreign agent being a U.S. agent. There are specific power of attorney or written authorization that the U.S. agent has to receive from the FPPI. Your forwarder should be aware and understand that. And again, that whole process is to give the U.S. party to be considered the authorized agent in the transaction here from the United States. And finally, one of the items certainly that comes out of all this is the various documents that I just mentioned are important for record keeping. And in the process, it could be a dock receipt or delivery order initially when the cargo is picked up and delivered to the carrier. Then you would issue your bill of lading or waybill on the air side. The commercial invoice, as it's noted here, often provided by the shipper. What that can identify is if there is a technology integration and your data is being received electronically by the forwarder, that would also have your cargo and pricing information, commodity information, and the forwarder then could produce a commercial invoice on behalf of the exporter based on the information that's provided. But normally, or in many cases, the commercial invoice is provided by the shipper, exporter. Packing list of your goods, certificate of origin, again, if it's required. There are countries out there that want to know and have a CO for commodities coming into their country, and any other documents that might be tied into either your particular type of cargo, the country that it's destined for, or some other particular arrangement. And so finally, with this last slide, I think it's always important to plan ahead. And as I mentioned earlier, be sure to get your forwarder involved in the early stages so the two of you can talk it out and plan as you're putting your transaction together. So,
perfect. Very comprehensive, and thank you for going through each of those. A good food for thought for all companies as they're looking to ship and to select a freight forwarder. We've had some very good questions come in, which we'll jump into now, the Q&A session. And I want to ask the operator to explain to participants how they can also verbally ask questions.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1, unmute your line, and record your name. To withdraw your question, press *2. Again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. One moment, please.
So while we wait for those questions to come in, Butch, I'm going to go ahead and raise a couple that have been typed in. And, of course, participants, you're welcome to type in questions as we go along in this period as well. Again, that's at the top of your screen. So one participant asked about Express, using an Express service, DHL, FedEx, and such, versus a freight forwarder. Is there sort of a threshold where it makes sense to go with one over another?
Yes, certainly there can be. When you're dealing with the smaller packages, on the ocean side, you could end up hitting a lot of minimum charges that are required. And I would say on the balance with air, you are probably looking at somewhere between 100 and 150 pounds of cargo, in which somewhere in there would be the break point of wanting to move with an express carrier versus having a forwarder arrange it.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb. Another question that came in is about the importance of establishing a strong one-on-one relationship with a particular freight forwarder versus perhaps shopping out, each transaction that may be needed. Getting different quotes, that type of thing. How would you weigh those?
Sure. I think that is important, certainly initially. If you've done your homework and it's time to go forward and you are looking to certainly start with a quote and just see how the prices may match up. Again, it's important that, and this goes along with the experience for the exporter, that both parties are providing the same information and you're looking at apples to apples. Because we find in many cases there are just various costs that are left out, whether it's some kind of a fuel surcharge or document fee or transfer cost of some sort, which will then come up at the end and can surprise an exporter. But I think it is important that they do some comparison. Certainly early on in the process, but building the partnership is important. And I think that the exporter will, come along and understand and I think it will be easy enough for them to get a comfort level at some point with a forwarder, and then be able to proceed with that party.
Thanks. Operator, are there questions in the queue?
Yes. Your first question comes from Kathleen Martin. Your line is open.
Hi. I was wondering if shipping, duty, and tax charges should be included on the commercial invoice.
Thank you, Kathleen. Duties and taxes on a commercial invoice. Well, it can depend. You're talking about destination duty and taxes?
Yes. Sometimes I am responsible for sending it out with the duties and taxes paid.
Yes, and again, that would be defined by the Incoterm.
DDP or DDU or DDP?
DDP.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Okay.
That would be that's where that would be defined, and that would be at the time that you would use that. Yes.
Okay. Do I have to include that amount and the shipping charges on the commercial invoice when I send the commercial invoice to the forwarder or with the package?
Yes. If the forwarder has already helped you and is able to provide some estimate on those duty charges, then you could provide that on your commercial invoice to them.
Okay.
And just to also make a point there, that with any duties, really almost in any country, most of the time you're going to be fairly close, but if there were for any reason it's any kind of a change, that final invoice that the customs sees in the country is going to be what identifies the duties that will be applied. So they may alter a little bit from what you have on your commercial invoice, but usually it shouldn't be a big impact.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you say, Butch, that for most of the shipments that you are supporting, how does it break out in terms of the terms? Is delivery, duty paid, DDP a more common approach, or is CIF, cost, insurance, and freight? Is there any sort of term?
Well, I think it can depend on the exporter, and we find, and I think most in the industry would find, that it would be best for a U.S. exporter to control the freight because they know that the freight forwarder is going to be complying with all regulations, and they are looking out for your best interest and making sure that all the paperwork is properly issued. There should be no hang-ups at destination for clearance and delivery. There certainly have been many nightmares when a U.S. party has turned the freight over to an agent that is authorized by the foreign party, and then the foreign party will say, well, where's my freight? And the U.S. party has no control or really a feel for what has gone on in the process because they were taken out of the equation. So in many cases, I think a lot of U.S. parties like to control that routing.
Good point. Is there another question in the queue?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, let me then throw out another one related to the subject of Incoterms. One of the participants asked if you could explain ExWorks.
Sure. ExWorks is where the party purchasing would be in control of moving the freight from door seller to door buyer. So they would be covering all the costs. And in this case, if you're looking at a U.S. exporter and their buyer wants the terms to be ExWorks, that would mean that they would not be in control of the movement, would not have to worry about the cost involved. But what would be important for a U.S. exporter in using the ExWorks terms with their buyer is that they get a copy of the AES transaction that has been issued with Customs because they will still be considered the U.S. PPI, and it would be important that they have that for their records because they are not dealing with a forwarder that they usually have a relationship with. And again, you just want to make sure that everything is done in compliance.
Another question came in, which I'll go ahead and read, and it asks, when, if ever, would it be better to have a freight forwarder instead of a direct relationship with a carrier? They add, this is considering you have enough volume to have a direct relationship with a carrier to make that viable.
Well, one of the key points is that a carrier does not issue documentation in reference to the shipment. So they have to be provided information, and it's the forwarder's role who would provide the information to the carrier. Yes, one of the items the carrier does is issue a bill of lading, but that information has to be received by them, and normally in a documentation process, that's where a forwarder is involved initially. And maybe that question has a little bit involved with if the forwarder is an NVOCC, and where they're saying if you have just the relationship with the carrier versus the forwarder. Again, an NVOCC and a forwarder who is an NVOCC does have options available, whereas the exporter wouldn't if they were just involved with a specific one carrier. Maybe that carrier only moves cargo out of the Gulf, and it calls maybe Savannah and New York, but you really need your freight to move out of, say, Norfolk for some reason, and the NVO has the flexibility to interact with multiple carriers who could have that service that you require out of the particular ports and to a final destination.
And related to this, there was a question that asked if it was better to hire a freight forwarder that owns a vessel or doesn't own a vessel, if that is a worthwhile consideration, if anything.
Most forwarders, I had mentioned in one of my slides, do not own and operate vessels. They would actually be the carriers, the ocean carriers themselves.
Right. Good. Are there any other questions that have come up in the queue, operator?
Not from the phone, no.
Good. Well, we are at the top of the hour. And we promised you an hour program with Butch Conner of John S. Conner. There's some excellent information provided today. Butch has generously provided his contact information, his email address, and the offer, if you have other points of clarification that have come up that you haven't had a chance to ask or occur to you later, to please do reach out to him. I want to let the participants know that I'll be sending you this week a link to replay a recording of this and a copy of the presentation as well. A reminder, we have a number of great programs recorded on the export.gov/webinars link on Incoterms, on export documentation, on complying with NAFTA, determining origin, things like that, selecting international markets, a whole host, as well as a very robust series planned for 2012, which we're only just starting. So temporary imports, duty drawbacks, FTAs, there's been some new ones announced, what that could mean for your company, and more. So check out that schedule. A special thanks to our presenter, Butch Conner, and all of you for joining us today. And with that, let me invite Butch to say any last words, and then we'll close the program.
No, I appreciate the opportunity today, and certainly want to thank Kelly and the Department of Commerce to be involved.
Wonderful. Wish you all a great day. Bye-bye.